Now, I became an environmental activist while I was a student here at ASM, although I did come to ASM when I was only 4 years old, so I don't really know how I could have been an activist before then. I'd say it all started around 3rd grade, and there's a picture of me from around that time. In 3rd grade, we had a project called the Endangered Animals Project. The Endangered Animals Project was a project in which we each got assigned an endangered animal and had to learn about why that animal was endangered and the habitat where it lived. Now, I got assigned the polar bear, and I had thousands of pictures of polar bears all over my room, because another part of the Endangered Animals Project was that you had to draw your endangered animal on a pin and then sell those pins. From the money you got from the pins you sold, you were able to support NGOs that helped that animal and the habitat where it lived and help prevent it from being endangered. So I would stare at pictures of polar bears for hours and hours and hours at a time, because it's actually really hard to draw a polar bear. From then until now, I still talk about environmental issues with my friends. And a common question that comes up is what now? As in, what can we do now in our day-to-day lives in order to be more environmentally friendly? I have come up with a list of 4 steps in order for you to have a greener year. These are 4 easily implementable steps for people of all ages, and the 4 steps that I use in my day-to-day life. 2020 was a year that most of us spent inside 4 walls, the 4 walls of your quarantine home. And if you were lucky, those 4 walls contained 4 separate rooms: an office or study area, a bathroom, a bedroom, and a kitchen. So these 4 steps are going to be 1 step in each of these rooms. Let's begin with your office or study area. When most of us have a question, we'll go to the internet to look it up. And the search engine most commonly used is Google. I recommend that you switch this to Ecosia. Ecosia is a search engine that, from its ad revenue, for an average of every 45 searches, it will plant 1 tree. That means that if you're searching something up 7 times a day, or using the application 7 times, at the end of the week, you'd reach those 45 searches. And at the end of the year, you'd be able to plant 52 trees, all from behind your desk. The second room that I want to talk to you about today is your bathroom, and specifically the plastic waste produced in the bathroom. A common example of plastic waste is, for example, in the form of your shampoo bottles or your soap dispensers. Now, instead of using the plastic shampoo bottles or plastic soap dispensers, you could use bar soap or bar shampoo. A webpage where you could find more information about how to live a zero-waste lifestyle is Trashes for Tossers, found up there on the slide. I want to focus on your toothbrushes. The American Dental Association recommends that you change your toothbrush on average every 3 to 4 months. That means that you'd be going through 300 toothbrushes in your lifespan. Now, when I told my dad these numbers, he thought that it was all a ploy from the American Dental Association in order to get us to buy more toothbrushes. But if we take this data as actually accurate, you'd be going through 3 to 4 toothbrushes a year. National Geographic came out with a series of articles on the history of plastic, and they estimated that each plastic toothbrush takes around 1,000 years to break down once it's been thrown out. If you're going through 4 a year, that means you're generating 4,000 years worth of waste, just in the form of toothbrushes. Luckily, there are alternatives to this. You could buy, for example, a toothbrush with a metal handle, where the only plastic part is the bristles at the top, and that's the only part you have to replace. Or you could buy a bamboo toothbrush. Now, a bamboo toothbrush will break down in a compost in 6 months. That means that for every plastic toothbrush you are replacing with a bamboo toothbrush, you're reducing your waste by 999 years and 6 months. The third room that I want to talk to you about today is your bedroom. Most people I know spent quarantine doing a closet clean out, and they discovered there are a lot of clothes you either don't wear or don't use. Elizabeth Klein wrote a book called Overdressed, and she states that the average piece of clothing is only worn 7 times before being thrown out. In the documentary, The True Cost, all about the true cost of fast fashion, they state that the average American consumer will throw out 37 kilos of clothes per year. 37 kilos is a huge amount. That's maybe half my body weight, which is insane. There are alternatives to throwing out these clothes. For example, you could donate them to a secondhand shop like Umana, or to NGOs or charities, or you could even make a profit and sell them online on applications like Wallapop or even Vintage. You could always come up with creative options for what to do with these textiles and clothes, like, for example, you could sew the textiles into the inner lining of a pencil case or cut up a big towel into small dish rags. The BBC article, the BBC Future article from 2020 estimated that of the clothes thrown out, 84% of it ends up in an incinerator, meaning that 25 kilos of clothes and textiles get burned per person per year, even though the overwhelming majority of these textiles could be recycled. So our goal should be to reduce those 25 kilos of waste from ending up in the incinerator. The fourth room that I want to talk to you about today is the kitchen, and specifically food waste. Deliciously Ella's podcast states that on an individual level, one of the biggest impacts we could make on the environment is by reducing the amount of food that we waste. The number one waste found in US landfills is actually food, and 1/3 of the food made for human consumption is thrown out. The most common food thrown out, or one of the most common foods thrown out, is actually bread. And the typical example is that you'd buy a loaf of sliced bread and leave it out, and eat maybe a few slices every day, but at the end of the week, you would throw out the last few slices. The Guardian estimated that in the UK, one slice of bread is thrown out in every household per week. If we were able to solve this problem, we'd save 52 slices of bread at the end of the year. And a simple solution to this is, for example, if you can freeze your bread and toast it the next day. That way, you could have a freshly toasted slice of bread instead of an old, rotten, spoiled slice of bread that you'd have to throw out. Now, if you want to go the extra mile, you could download the application called Too Good To Go. Too Good To Go is an application that connects consumers with food producers and restaurants. And food producers and restaurants that are going to throw out the food at the end of the day will sell it at a discounted price for consumers. So you, as a consumer, will benefit because you get to get the food at a discounted price and you have a positive impact on the environment. I personally use this app if I want to get takeout. Before checking Deliveroo or Uber Eats, I will check Too Good To Go to see what they have to offer. Now, the 4 steps that I've talked to you about today are: 1, use Ecosia as a search engine. 2, replace your plastic toothbrushes with bamboo toothbrushes. 3, recycle your textiles and clothes. And 4, freeze your bread and prevent food waste. Now, I want to tell you a story about a little boy. This story is adapted from Lauren Isley's essay written in 1969 called The Starfish Thrower. This little boy goes out on the beach one day and finds that it is covered in starfish washed up from the tide. And he runs around picking up each individual starfish and throwing it back in the water. and an old man comes up to him and he says, "Son, what are you doing? Do you see how many starfish there are out on this beach? You're never going to be able to make a difference." And the boy picks up a starfish and he thinks about this. And then he throws it back in the water. And he says, "Well, I sure made a difference to that starfish." Now, whenever you read about environmental issues, and you read about the impact of the meat industry or the travel industry or governments, you can get very overwhelmed. And a lot of times you can think that on an individual impact, you can never make a difference. And I want you to remember that small changes really do add up. And when you implement these 4 steps in your life, in just 1 year, you would be able to plant 52 trees, save 4 plastic toothbrushes from ending up in the trash, save 25 kilos of waste in the form of clothes and textiles from being burned, and save 52 slices of bread. I can make an impact, and you can make an impact, even if it's just in the 4 walls of your own home. Thank you very much.